Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Web Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, there's still a certain amount of mystery that surrounds the aborted meeting in Budapest. So, what happened? Because since everything seemed to be set for this meeting, and then it was aborted really within a few days. But even more
We
interesting.
fell for it. We fell
We
for it.
fell for it, absolutely. But even more interesting is what happened in Anchorage, Alaska in August. And there have been some media speculations of an interesting article in the Financial Times giving a kind of a Western spin on what happened. But one has to believe that even that Western spin that the Financial Times presented was in response to a very interesting interview that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov gave to a Hungarian media outlet the other day, in which he seemed to suggest that they were close to a deal in Anchorage, Alaska. The details of the deal he doesn't disclose, but it is very interesting that he considered they were close to a deal, in which case, of course, since it's the United States and that was Donald Trump who walked away from that deal, then the responsibility lies with Trump, much way with responsibility for everything that happened after the spring of 2022 lay with Boris Johnson and Joe Biden.
So, are we going into the realm of buyer's remorse?
That's
No,
very
I mean because again, to be very specific, we don't know what that deal
well.
was. We don't.
I want to play a little bit up from that
All
interview
right,
so
all right, all right. Okay.
we
I
can
mean, the reason why I'm saying buyer's remorse is that the Russians give the impression that the some kind of deal, some kind of roadmap, all the other words we throw around here, was in play. And when Trump got back, with Rubio right next door, do you think you really want to do that? I mean,
right. Yeah, but
we
that
haven't signed anything yet,
right, right. But well, all right. Let's first look at Lavrov's interview and listen carefully. I think to the words that he uh, uses.
From the leaders. President Putin yesterday commented upon the Russian-American relation at this particular stage. I wouldn't repeat what he said, but as regards the relations between Marco Rubio and myself, after the presidents had their conversation on the, I think, 16th of October, is it? Uh, this was Thursday, and 3 days later, on Monday, Rubio called me. We had a conversation, very specific, where I reconfirmed our full adherence to what was discussed in Alaska and to what understandings, clear understandings, the presidents reached at that time. As you know, President Trump praised the Alaska meeting repeatedly, that this was a very good meeting, that it set the stage, laid the foundation. He said there are a few issues to be fine-tuned, but this could be done easily. One issue is important, he said in his comments about the outcome of Alaska, but this important issue is absolutely subject to finding a solution, which is absolutely our assessment. After we talked with Marco Rubio regarding following up on the results of Alaska, he did not mention any new meetings or conversations, and I did not raise the issue because the entire initiative was coming from the United States, and I thought we would be ready to move as the Americans feel comfortable for themselves. Then the State Department issued a communique about our phone conversation, if I remember right, which said that we had productive discussion with Marco Rubio, and at at this stage, there is no need in a personal meeting between the Secretary of State and the Foreign Minister of Russia. So I concluded that the meeting was really good if they made such a comment. And I understand what is behind it. Behind it is the clarity with which we discussed the necessary steps together with Marco Rubio, steps which the Russian Federation and the United States can take to implement very clear, very blunt understandings reached in Alaska.
Always, if you are talking, we feel the chance the conflict can be.
Excuse the rather poor English of the of the
What
Hungarian journalist.
what a faux pas, really. I had no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, given here's Lavrov speaking in English.
Well, isn't it interesting, George? I was thinking about Lavrov speaking English in Budapest. Well, that's a change. I mean, Hungary was within the Soviet sphere of influence. They all learned Russian. Okay, obviously this is a younger man, but it tells us a lot about the change
Yeah.
of times. But to further that, I would have expected fluent English.
Well, that's right. Incidentally, I should say that Seattle was at this meeting in Minsk a few days ago. Another one of these big Eurasian security conference. He spoke in Russian. The Hungarian foreign minister spoke in Russian. I was quite astonished by that. I mean, because they pretty much stopped teaching Russian in 1989. They used to teach it. 1989, they stopped, and anyone who knew Russian in 1989 went out of his way to forget all the Russian that they knew. But as you say, this guy is supposed to be speaking in English.
Be ended. But after, when we read the press, it's a different pictures. But why will you not call back Marco Rubio in this situation? And you can call back Marco Rubio and say, "Hello, I read in Reuters. Why don't you talk to each other more?"
Look at Lavrov.
I called him before Alaska, soon after Alaska, and we met in New York just 3 weeks ago. And as I said, the initiative to have this look, President Putin came to Alaska with the agenda which had been brought to Moscow by Stephen Witkoff few days before the Alaska summit. And we looked into the proposals which Stephen Witkoff brought. And we said that we need to think about it. And then in Alaska, President Putin said that he is ready to cooperate on the basis, which was on the basis of the concept and the framework which the envoy of President Trump brought to Moscow, and which they continued to discuss in Alaska. President Putin repeated each and every element of the concept which was brought by Stephen Witkoff, and was asking Stephen Witkoff, who was present at the discussions in Anchorage, is that right? Is that right? Everything was confirmed. And then President Putin said that we are ready to accept your concept, and that's how we believe we can move in specific terms on the basis of what you proposed. Then there was no direct response. They agreed that they should take some time to think about it. President Trump said he needs to talk to his allies, who, as you remember, came to Washington next day. Zelensky was brought with them. And President Putin, of course, briefed his allies, our neighbors, and strategic partners. Then there was no, so the ball was there on the side of the Americans, who proposed something which we eventually were ready to accept. And in New York, I reminded Marco Rubio about this sequence of events. He said, yes, we are still considering, we are trying, we are interested. So, from the diplomatic point of view, we don't want to interfere in their internal considerations. We don't want to create some discomfort for the United States, which is under huge, unbelievable pressure from the European hawks, from Zelensky, and others who don't want to have any American-Russian cooperation on anything.
All right. So I mean, I want to play a fairly extensive segment because it is quite an extraordinary statement from Lavrov. I mean, he's you know, we can leave aside what was the concept, but as he presents it, Witkoff came and presented a concept or a peace plan. The Russians said, "Okay, we can go move forward on the basis of this plan." Then they met in Anchorage, and then, as Lavrov says it, Putin said, "This is your plan. This is right. Is this right? Is this right? Is this right?" And Witkoff nods his head. Yeah, that's it. That was the plan. Um, what then happens is very, very interesting, because if I, as later on in the interview says, well, Trump was very positive about the outcome in Anchorage. So if we now look at what was it that Trump said after Anchorage, I mean, it does bear out what Lavrov was saying. Because here, if you look at this is his, you remember they had that presser. It was a kind of a joint presser, but it was very brief. And Putin went first, and then Trump, and then he says, "Thank you very much, Mr. President. That was very profound, and I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on. Most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. Um, I will call up NATO in a little while, and I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate. And I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. Who's the all right? Who's them? They're going to have to agree with Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who come here." And then he does the thing, and then we really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin. With Vladimir, we had many, many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. It made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things during the course of his career. He's seen it all. But we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax. I guess, and so again, he talks about the hoax. And then, so just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting. So again, he says that, and many points were agreed to. There are just a few that are
I'm going to
left.
be short, George. I'm going to be short. Okay. Okay.
Exactly. There are just a few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin, blah, blah. And then he sent out, this is just talking about the casualties and so on. Yeah. So this is the truth that Trump then sent out immediately afterwards. He said, "A great and very successful day in Alaska. The meeting with President Putin of Russia went very well, as did a late night phone call with President Zelensky of Ukraine and various European leaders, including the highly respected Secretary." I can't say that without laughing. Who respects him highly?
It should be parentheses. Who calls me daddy, by the way? Okay.
Highly respect. It was determined by all that the best way to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine is to go directly to a peace agreement, which would end the war and not a mere ceasefire agreement, which oftentimes do not hold up. And then he tells Zelensky is coming to the Oval Office on Monday afternoon. If all works out, we will then schedule a meeting with President Putin. Potentially millions of people's lives will be saved. Um, so that sequence of events bears out what Lavrov was saying. We were close to an agreement. Um, and then I think there was obviously just panic stations in the European cause after that phone call. So because Trump said, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna call all my NATO buddies," he evidently did that, and then there was just simply they trooped off within 48 hours. They flew to Washington. That was all of them: Starmer, Macron, Merz, Maloney, Ursula von der Leyen, Mark Rutte, everyone piled on to Washington because they obviously were very concerned about what happened in Alaska, and Trump walked away. And I think that's a fateful step because we talked about before about is it Biden's war, is it Trump's war? When he walked away from that, then it really did become Trump's war. I mean, up until then, we can argue well that he
Sure, sure, sure.
inherited a war and he just carried on basically, through inertia, continued the Biden policy. Here, he had an opportunity to end it. He walked away. Then it really does become Trump's war.
Yes, yes. And I mean, when again, kind of reading the tea leaves here, um, and it's very important that George showed that last Truth Social
Right.
posting, 'cause I think that's really key here. Um, in principle, and we talked about this, is that he remember everybody up until that moment, ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. That was the
Right.
narrative. And Trump dramatically walked away from it
Yes.
very publicly.
Yes.
And and he used a peace agreement. That's what the Russians want, a
Right.
peace agreement.
Right.
So we see, a wild card in all of this is Witkoff,
Yep.
okay? Because what kind of mandate does he have? He's Trump's friend. Okay,
Right.
that's his mandate.
Right.
And so I think that, what Lavros was getting to, and it's something that George and I have advocated
Right.
for the longest time, is that you basically go large and then you go
Yes.
small. You go
Yes.
pan-European security architecture,
Yep.
and that will solve the Ukraine problem because everyone will get something, or everyone is treated as, in theory at least,
Right.
an equal stakeholder
Right.
in European security.
Yep.
It seems to me that was going on. Well, you and I talked about it in real
Yep.
time. It's just
Of
like
course
it
it did. Yep.
seems
Yep.
like what they're moving towards. Then suddenly the door is slammed closed. I don't see it. I Hours after that, I came to the conclusion, I can be wrong, that this is a certain shift that we could make the argument the entire 10 months of the Trump administration was coming to terms, dealing with, trying to get out of the
Right.
Biden foreign policy, and
Yes.
then they just collapsed.
Yes. That's right. That's right. Exactly. Because, in any war, there's always going to be moments when you are close to an agreement. Those are fateful moments. You just need the extra couple of steps and you've got a deal and the war comes to an end. And I think there was something like that happened in Anchorage. I think the Russians were obviously making considerable sacrifice. So we don't know what the concept is. We're just speculating. We're going by what the media stories were at the time, which was basically Ukrainian withdrawal from the Donbass, where there's a freeze on the line of conflict in Kherson and Zaporozhye. That was in the media. I don't know if that's true, but that's what the media speculation was in the Witkoff plan. But one has to assume Witkoff wasn't just, oh well, hey, I'll just come up with a plan. I mean, he had to have cleared it with Trump. I mean, it's like it's Trump's plan, and Witkoff is the messenger. I mean, that's the only thing that could. But even after Alaska, the moment Trump said, "Oh, we're going to have this meeting with the NATO allies," you kind of knew, well, if that's going to happen, there's no way you're gonna reach any kind of an
Well, I mean, what
agreement.
did they do? Did they go down the path of emotional? When I mean emotional, going straight for his ego. saying, well, if this is where you're going, then this is Russia wins and you lose.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the message, probably
Yes.
kept pounding away that
Yes.
you're on the losing side. The history will remember you as a loser,
Right.
okay? And
Yeah.
that, and basically, after watching this political figure, Donald Trump, for 10 years, that's probably the most effective strategy you can apply.
Yes, that's right. And I mean, then I guess there was another opportunity. Putin calls him up, so that's October the 16th. So that's you're basically it's 2 months after Alaska. They have a 2.5 hour conversation. That's a very lengthy conversation. I mean, that's that's and since Putin understands English, he doesn't speak English, but he understands it. So therefore, they don't need he didn't need the interpretation of getting translating Trump's words into Russian. I wouldn't have thought so. So they had to have had fairly substantial conversations. And it was after that Trump said, "Oh, we're going to have a meeting in Budapest." He was the one who sent out that truth. We're going to have a meeting. The Russia did not respond for about 2 hours. It was 2 hours later, that they said,
Yeah,
"Yeah, yeah, maybe."
George and I did a
Yeah,
podcast at in that
yeah,
time, and we were kind of, well, we're not sure if the Russians have picked up on it or not. Okay,
right.
we got caught there. Yeah,
That's right. The Russians said, maybe, I think, or probably
I
Budapest.
remember using the word very conditional, very
That's
conditional.
right. They didn't say yes, definitely, but Trump said definitely in Budapest. And then Orban immediately rushed out and said, "Yeah, that's it. This is the island of peace. This is exactly where you want to have the meeting." And then the next day, Orban had a conversation with Putin, and again, it seemed like we're going somewhere. And then Zelensky shows up on Friday, and the meeting is
Not a
quite
good meeting. Not a
not a
good
good
meeting.
meeting. And then at the end, Trump sends out that truth saying, "Oh, well, the best thing is freeze the conflict in place and then let history decide who won and who lost." He had to have known that there's no way on earth that the Russians are going to accept that. We've already been there, been there, done that, and yet now he's gone back to that formula. That's why the Europeans were kind of happy about that. That's why they didn't even bother showing up for Washington. That's it. We've got Trump. We've got him where we want him. And then to compound this all, then Trump then issues these sanctions, which are quite serious, and he kind of pushes Orban under the bus because these sanctions are going to hit Hungary. And he even said the other day, he was asked, "Hey, well, Viktor Orban isn't very happy about these sanctions." I said, "Yeah, he asked for an exemption. We didn't give it to him." Now, maybe Trump will change his mind. Orban's coming to Washington this week.
Yeah, but that certainly plays into the hands of the Europeans because with the election on the horizon in Hungary, Orban is going to be he's going to be one blamed for the
Yeah.
deterioration of living standards. Okay,
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
music to Brussels' ears.
Exactly. Because this is going to be quite difficult for him, and it will lead to a rise in energy prices. Inflation is already quite problematic in Hungary. You bung a big energy hikes in winter, and yeah, absolutely, they're gonna take out their anger on Orban. So yeah, absolutely, the Europeans are very happy. But for Trump to say, yeah, he asked for an exemption, we didn't give it to him. Well, that's nice. He was your most loyal supporter. Well, we'll
Well,
have to.
it doesn't cut that much ice with me because he went to Israel and told the president of Israel to give a pardon to Netanyahu. Okay, he with Milei in Argentina, basically, I'm going to give you 40 billion, $40 million lifeline, and the voters said, yeah, we'll. It looks like we'll get, this will be a stay of execution for Melee's policies. Okay, no, Trump could easily do that. Okay, I'm sorry, it doesn't cut any ice with me whatsoever. He could have said, and I told the European Commission, you have to give Hungary a pass here, and they would have done it.
Right. No, no, but it's really problematic because with these sanctions, when you know that this is where Hungary gets its oil, and that means all kinds of third parties are going to be very wary of doing business with the Hungarian refineries. Suddenly these refineries, with insurance and payments and everything, it becomes the secondary sanctions can be very, very difficult.
Yeah, well, you impose secondary sanctions and then you have the lawyers figure it out later, but that could be years later.
Exactly, exactly. But we'll see. I mean, Orban is coming to Washington, and I'm sure that's going to be top of the agenda. Can we have an exemption? But it's still, very interesting. I mean, why do you think Trump twice walked away from a possible
You
deal?
know, it may be even just a fool's errand to even try to figure that out at this point. I think the real question is, what if after he meets Udom, he flips again, George?
Yeah, right.
Okay. I mean, and what will the Russians pick up the phone? Or maybe it'll be an undersecretary of an assistant or something. And it's like, we've done a lot of talking. We went,
Yeah,
you know, Trump had to fly a long way to go to Anchorage. Putin had to fly further.
yeah,
Okay. He had to fly literally halfway around the world.
yeah,
Because if you look at Russia, Kaliningrad, and you go all, and then there you are with the Kamchatka Peninsula. That's halfway around the world.
yeah.
Okay. Um, Again, you see this enormous amount of patience from Lavrov. I mean, I couldn't hold myself together if I was him in his shoes right now. I mean,
Yes.
what do you think, George? I mean, I'm just basically completely out of answers now. I mean, because the data points tell me one thing and then the results are the other. I don't see what to connect. I mean, and to be honest with you, I'm exhausted by it. I'm sure you are too.
It is exhausting, because this was really a campaign promise. I mean, this
Well,
was
I mean,
a very big deal for him.
okay, I mean, there's some tertiary things that we can throw around. Okay, um, um, the Israelis don't want Russia in the Middle East, so keep them busy in Ukraine. Okay, there's the Iran agenda on the horizon. Is this the foreign policy blob saying, "Look, I mean, we've got them pinned down." They're expending a lot of resources for this. Yeah, they probably will win, but that's another day. It's not today. And so I'm just kind of thinking maybe it's just much broader issues. Okay, of course, having the arms producers, they want to keep this thing going.
Right,
Okay,
right.
I mean there's outer tertiary things. Um, or, maybe we go narrow and then the people around saying, you just can't make a deal with this guy. You can't. Okay.
No, I think it's a very interesting insight into Trump, because Trump somehow he makes out that he's thinks outside the box. He's got a very original way of looking at the world, and in a way he does. He's kind of different from others.
Well,
But in the
he's
end,
definitely different.
he comes back to the same old, same old. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's something that hey, Russia is basically it's against us. It's working against our interests. You remember when that truth that he sent out when Putin and Kim Jong Un were at the Beijing, the commemoration, the 80th anniversary of end of World War II, and then he sent something out like, well, have a good time plotting against America. So in a way, it still comes back to these familiar tropes. And now, in a way, I mean, NATO has him where they want him. They said, okay, you're now committed to this policy.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, he still comes out, oh, well, it's both sides have to make an agreement. Russia will have to make concessions. Ukraine has to make concessions. But yeah, but you're only one side. You're only punishing one side. You've done nothing to any punishment for Ukraine. So you basically are doing exactly what Biden was doing. It's no different. It's
Well, I
exactly
mean,
what it was.
but someone could make the case, and maybe it would resonate with Trump is that, well, we haven't lost, so let's keep it going.
Yeah, no, I think that's
We,
exactly
we haven't
exactly
lost.
that's exactly what the argument is. Yeah,
So if we haven't lost, why should we make any kind of concession now?
right.
My usual retort to all of this is, oh, but how does this help Ukraine?
It
Okay, but
doesn't.
that's not part of the
It
that's not
doesn't.
part of the conversation.
No, it doesn't help. But but it's a safe for him to do because then he comes back and then he's the he really values being told that you single-handedly saved NATO. NATO was on its last legs, and you came and you saved it.
You
Thank you.
saved Palestine too. You
Yeah,
freed
exactly.
Palestine. What? Just
It's
think of
like,
that. You freed. What does that even mean? Okay.
well, what you said is very true. The Economist, which we tend to have a good laugh about the in-house magazine of the important people, the really important people, the people who travel business class.
Business. Wow, great minds think alike. I just said it. Business class. That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
I'll have another bubbly, please.
Exactly. And then they leaf through their free copy of the
Oh, what's
Economist.
the Big Mac Index have to say today?
That's it. And so here was this article. It's in this week's issue of The Economist, and here it is. It's saying,
Is this the same issue where they have the catch-22 like helmet on the
yeah,
cover?
I think so. Yes, that's right. Yes,
Okay.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yes, um, on the cover. This is online. Yeah, why funding Ukraine is a giant opportunity for Europe.
Yeah. Wow.
It's
Yeah.
fantastic. It's a just
You have no idea what an opportunity this is.
exactly. It's so great. The bill will be huge. It is also a historic bargain. The bill will be huge. When you say the bill will be huge, that's a bill for European taxpayers. They're going to pay. I mean, the whole idea, well, I mean, who's going to pay this bill? I mean, it's taxpayers that pay the bill. And here it says a 4-year commitment would cost 390 billion. They just pluck these numbers out of the air. It's going to be a lot more than that. Composed almost entirely of donated weapons and cash to finance Ukraine's budget deficits. It's a
Okay, full
lot.
stop. But how is that? But that's what they've been doing.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. Yeah.
so you're just going to keep doing what we've been doing.
Exactly. Finance Ukraine's budget deficits. But the budget apparently are just limitless. You can just limitless deficits. This is a lot, but it's excellent value. Spread across the economic resources of all NATO members, not counting America, the bill for Ukraine is affordable, with annual costs rising from 0.2% of GDP last year to 0.4% of GDP. That's a lot of money. It's not 0.2%. That's GDP of Europe as a whole. Europe as a whole, that's a big, big economic enterprise. 0.2% of that, that's a lot of money. And he said, oh yeah, we'll go up to 0.4%. And then what? You're going to go up, well, how about 0.6%? The alternative would be for Ukraine to lose the war and become an embittered, semi-failed state whose army and defense industries could be exploited by Mr. Putin as part of a new, reinvigorated Russian threat. So this is a real bargain. If we don't do it, then we get a Russian threat on our hands.
Yeah, but this is the sunk cost
Yeah,
fallacy.
absolutely. That's right. This newspaper supports the seizure of Russian assets. Oh,
Yeah, you're stealing. George, you go steal someone else's money. I agree with it. You go right ahead. Okay.
Exactly. That's right. So support the seizure of it. So when we're running out of cash, where can we get some cash from? Oh, let's raid the bank. We can steal some money from the bank and then and keep this enterprise on the road. But they are 230 billion short of what's needed. So we got to steal some more. So where do we go? Oh, go to the European taxpayers, and then we tell them this is a real bargain. there's no money for all kinds of things. The conditions in Europe are deteriorating daily in all sorts of ways. But hey, it's a great bargain. We're going to keep Russia at bay.
Given the size of the challenge, I you're going to have to make an argument for
Well, the size of the challenge, Europe collectively.
I mean, uh, it, but this kind of language is a self-fulfilling prophecy. What they're doing is this is called threat inflation. What they're
Yes,
doing is creating the
yes,
threat, and we must pay for it
that's right.
up front.
That's
Okay.
right. And that's the key, because how else are you going to justify this? I mean, you the only way you can justify splurging this kind of money is, well, there's a Russian threat. If we don't spend this money, and more and more, then Putin is going to, he's going to attack us. He's going to invade us.
Yeah, again, so not the Donbass has not been completely liberated
Yeah,
from Ukraine, from Kiev's control.
yeah,
And now Russia's eyeing Belgium.
that's right.
Uh,
um, some sort of joint borrowing would be justified.
oh, some sort. Yeah,
Joint borrowing.
let the accountants worry about some sort.
Yeah, John, borrowing. Well, the thing about borrowing is this: you have to pay it back eventually, and interest. And that's the important part. You have to pay the interest on the joint borrowing. Far from undermining the euro's international status, for the EU to issue bonds collectively would create a bigger pool of common debt, deepening Europe's single capital market and boosting the role of the euro as a reserve currency.
Actually, it's just the
Of
reverse.
course,
It's just the reverse. What will those bonds be worth?
nothing.
And who will want to buy them?
No, 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 no.
Okay, okay. And if this somehow, in any way, shape, or form, is tied to seizing Russian assets, nobody.
No, that's right.
Nobody will touch that. That is so toxic.
Right.
I don't want to hold a bond in which my financial services is going to be in litigation for the next 10 years. No, 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 no.
And of course,
No,
the
no
bond,
sovereign funds for sure.
but also the bond yields will soon be astronomical, since no one has any confidence in them. The yields are going to rise, and therefore the cost of borrowing is going to keep rising. Um, a multi-year horizon for weapon procurement would help Europe sequence the buildup of its defense industry. In the short term, Europe should have no qualms about buying the American weapons that Ukraine needs, including air defense system. Later spending should favor European defense firms as they develop their own systems, as well as Ukraine's own cutting-edge defense tech.
So we need to keep this going on for at least a decade.
Yeah, and more, because we have to prepare for Russia. So that's the economist. Now you were saying, probably this is the kind of argument that was eventually persuasive for Trump. Yeah, we can keep it going. We can keep it going another 4, 5, 6 years. Why not? And you'll be hailed as the hero. You'll be hailed as the person who made it all happen. NATO will be stronger. Ukraine will be stronger.
You will be the 21st century Churchill, that you
That's
were
it.
persevered.
That's right. That's it.
Okay.
That's it. Um, but I think the now I think Trump's claim, oh, this is Biden's war. It's not my war. It's now that really has to be thrown out of the window. I mean, and he needs to be really seriously called out on it, because this is his war. You had two opportunities to bring it to an end. Um, all these things, all these deals, they're not at all favorable for Russia. I mean, it's basically just as the Istanbul deal was not favorable to Russia. I think whatever they were really willing to agree to in Anchorage was not particularly favorable to Russia. But
Yeah, I mean,
they were willing to do a deal with Trump. Hey, you're a deal maker. Let's do a deal.
what befuddles me a bit is, yeah, he would take slings and arrows, obviously from the establishment. That's a given. But they do that to him all the time
They do
anyway.
it all the time.
But what befuddles me is that this is a signed, sealed, and delivered victory for his base. See? I mean, I don't know who said it, but it was actually kind of funny. Well, I think it was, I think it was Kellogg that said it. He said, "Well, Trump said he would end it in a day. He just didn't name the day," which I thought was kind of funny. That was good. That was good. Okay, from that fossil from the Cold War. But I mean, the base would have said, "See, he did it. He did it." And it was Biden's war anyway.
Right, right.
I think that would have gone a great distance considering the ongoing criticism of Trump's perceived, if not real, Zionism. Okay, solving it with Russia is not unpopular with MAGA.
No,
They're just not.
no,
Okay,
no.
they're
Uh,
just not, Russophobes. They're just not like bec- because Trump is obviously not giving preference to Russia. I mean, he may be to Argentina, certainly to Israel, but he's certainly not, serving up any positive things for Russia. I mean, I think it would have worked rhetorically, and he could have done
I
like
think so.
check, say check, done.
I think so too. One thought that does occur to me, is it possible that he's afraid? He's afraid about for his own physical security. If he were to abandon Ukraine and work out a deal, is he afraid that, suddenly he can slip, fall down the stairs and break his neck?
You know,
These kinds of things just
we can't know, but it seems okay. George and I've talked at great length about the so-called Trump peace plan for Gaza, and we will talk about it a lot more in the future. But he- with all of the violations going on, a lot of people are just grabbing on to threads right now, hoping to make it to the next day. Okay, this thing with Ukraine, it is. George said it perfectly. Had two chances, and you muffed it, man. You fumbled.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And so I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of people in our lane that will make the claim, and there are good arguments for it too, that he really isn't running his foreign policy. Um, it seems to me obvious from what information, what data points come our way. Marco Rubio he's come into being. I mean, this
Correct.
was,
Correct.
I thought he was just a wooden puppet a few weeks ago. Now he's turned into a maniacal
Yeah,
little boy.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, he's running it because Trump is kind of distracted by all sorts of other things, domestic affairs, government shutdown, the
Well, he's more,
whole.
Trump is far more interested in domestic affairs. This stuff, if he can get, control the news cycle, and he's the greatest president of ever, the peace president. He likes all that. My sense is he doesn't like to do the work, though.
No, no, and if you look at the man's career, he's always been a domestic affairs person. The only foreign affairs thing that he was ever interested in
China.
was trade, tariffs. He's always been for tariffs. But other than that, he's never really been particularly interested in foreign policy. So, he kind of got himself into the situation, with I think in 2016, he kind of stole Buchanan's and Ron Paul's views. I mean, I don't even that views. He never really was particularly
Well, there was that
kind of
article.
an
I think
anti-interventionist. It sort of was, but never with the passion and insight of Buchanan and Ron Paul.
exactly, and I think it was the national interest where Trump penned an article, and I remember reading it quite thoroughly. And I did a program on it, and myself and my guests, we all came to the conclusion that a number of people wrote that. There was not one single author, and Trump obviously didn't write it,
Right,
because there was a Pat Buchanan angle to it. There was. Obviously an American first
right,
because he was introducing it. I mean, it was an amalgam of
right,
different ideas and very contradictory. The more times you read it, you're like, this paragraph,
right,
this page, and this paragraph here
right.
are written by two different people for sure.
I think so, and I think he saw, the resonance that Buchanan had in the 90s within the Republican Party. And then, of course, in the aftermath of the Iraq debacle, when Ron Paul, he ran in 2008, 2012. And I think Trump kind of tapped into that. And I think maybe even to his own surprise, it worked for him. And I think then he just decided, he'll go with it. But I don't really think he's ever really thought this through. I mean, I just, in the way that both Paul and Buchanan really did think about those things, issues. So, it's like by default, Trump suddenly became this anti-interventionist. But that's why he could be so easily dissuaded from that view. After all, why would you hire John Bolton during your first term? John Bolton, and you're the anti-interventionist. Mike Pompeo, and you're the anti-interventionist. And then he starts this new administration. Marco Rubio, he's your Secretary of State.
Keith Kelly,
Keith Kellogg, yeah, yeah.
Kellogg, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's in a way, it's like it was like Barack Obama, who kind of also ran in 2008. Oh, Iraq, we're not going to do any more of these stupid wars. And then you hire Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, but see, this is ample evidence in the last 40 seconds of this podcast. The last 40 seconds is ample evidence that you running as an anti-war, running as an anti-interventionist is a vote getter, and
Yeah,
people like it.
right,
But when the push comes to shove, that agenda doesn't have any traction in the halls of power.
right.
Okay.
Yeah,
One of the things I want to know in the future, okay, we'll maybe Scott Horton will write about it, okay. Um, you know, how did the Europeans, what role did they play in this shift? Okay, because it's obvious to use a popular phrase. I don't particularly like it. The deep state or the administrative state, whatever you want to call it. Okay, they're tight. Transatlantically, they are very, very tight.
right,
And one day maybe we'll get a signal conversation with, Starmer and Macron and all these other people, how and plotting with Trump's subordinates in the
right,
executive branch, how we're going to take care of this. I'm sure it exists, okay? I'm
right.
sure it does, okay? But
Yeah.
I mean, what was the strategy? How did they pull it out? Who played what? I
No, I
mean,
think
they
that's a very interesting question. I mean, I guess at some point they're going to write their memoirs, and they're going to write about what actually happened during those 48 hours after the meeting in Anchorage. Obviously, there was panic in Europe. I mean, they thought, hey, this thing could be brought to
they
an
were
end.
panicking, and George and I were elated.
That's right. And I mean, it was an amazing thing. Look, these are all, these are all busy men. I mean, they're all heads of state, heads of government. So for the fact that they all found time to fly to Washington, at a moment's notice to see Trump means that they saw this as a really serious threat. Um, and Trump just seemed oblivious to the danger that he was facing. I mean, it's like when you realize they're all coming to they're going to really put the pressure on me, put the squeeze on me. I better avoid this. I don't want to be in the situation where I've got a room full of these people all berating me and telling me how awful Putin is.
Well,
Uh, yeah,
but see, George, it's one of the themes of our podcast is leadership, decision-making processes, how I don't want to use the word charisma, but through the force of your argument, you can win the day. Trump had none of these. He didn't have leadership
yeah,
here. His charisma, I wouldn't call it. I don't think Max Weber would call it. It's kind of a marketing charisma. It is an invention. It's not really particularly real. Uh, and if you are charismatic and you can marshal facts, oh my God, there's nothing that's going to stop you.
right,
Okay, but irrespective of the policy, which we would like to know how that was generated and enacted, he as a person, as a decision maker and leader, he he didn't rise to the occasion.
No, no. It's very interesting because we kind of think of him as a sort of an alpha male type. You know, he's the leader, everyone else is the follower. And in a way, people indulge him by suggesting, you know, well, President Trump thinks this, the president says that. You know, this is the president's policy. This is the president. I'm just trying to, you know, implement the president's policy. But in reality, he's not the leader. You know, he's basically buffeted by one faction or another, and then changes his mind according to which faction it has greater influence on him. So he doesn't actually have the leadership qualities. I mean, the leadership qualities are the leader is the one who sets out a vision and then asks his subordinates to implement that vision. It's not subordinates actually, you know, pushing the would-be leader in one direction or another. So he actually lacks those leadership qualities. You know, real estate, yeah, he can do real estate,
Yeah, yeah,
building and so on. But as a political leader, no.
one of the reasons we get, I'm sure people disparage our podcast is that, George and I are very fascinated, even fond of the Nixon presidency
Right,
because everything that George said that Trump failed on,
right,
Nixon
right,
succeeded.
right. Exactly.
He had a policy. He understood how the State Department worked. He understood how Congress. He understood the workings of government. And you could dislike the man for
Right,
whatever reason you want,
right,
okay? But he had a policy, and he knew exactly who to tap, who to
right.
shut out. I mean, Rogers, the Secretary of State. Does anybody remember him today?
No, no,
Nobody.
no, no.
Nobody
He's a
does.
good-looking guy. That's what people remember.
Yeah, yeah,
Musky guy.
a
Exactly.
patrician. Okay. Oh yeah, I mean the coif and the.
Yeah, that's it. Handsome,
You can
that
still
kind,
see it.
that waspy way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but Nixon, he knew what he wanted to do, and he enacted it. Okay, and with the Chinese, with the Soviets, I mean, you know, again, he's the most undeserved, disparaged president of the United States. Okay, I mean, Watergate was the fix was in against
right.
him. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. But I think it's very interesting that you bring this up because you can just see that if he'd gone to Alaska and then they discussed this, he would have come back. He would have had Kissinger say, "I want to follow this up. You know, just go ahead, follow that. Put you know your two or three most trusted aides and follow this up with the Russians. You know, maybe we can get a deal done. You know, within the next couple of weeks." And he would not have allowed himself to be, you know, swayed off course by the Europeans. I mean, they would have put in calls to him, but you know, he could have
Yeah,
just
but
fobbed
see,
them off.
George,
He wouldn't have had them in the White
yeah, but
House.
exactly, George. Why did he allow the European delegation into his home, the
Right.
White House?
That's
I
right.
wouldn't have.
No.
I'd say, no, you sit by the phone and you be ready to answer it, okay?
Right.
And I might call, I might not call, but be there ready. I don't need your feedback. I'm deciding this.
Right.
That's what a leader does.
Right.
That's what a leader does.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly how you do it.
And anyway, I know you don't want peace, so why should I talk to you?
That's it. Then that's it. I mean, that was the whole point. I mean, they had that meeting in Anchorage, and you had to have, you know, if it did follow the course that Lavrov describes, when Putin kept saying, "Is this right? Is this right? Is this right? Isn't this in your plan? Yeah, it's in my plan. Is this in your plan? Yeah, it's in my plan. Okay, we can work with this." And then you go back and just sort of, you know, allow yourself to be swayed. It's just total, you know, abdication of responsibility. And now he's got nothing. You know, he's doing the Biden
No,
thing.
I think, like I said earlier, I think he's in deficit territory right now. I mean, Steve Witkoff wants to come and talk. No, we've done that.
Right,
In Anchorage, he said, "Is this right? Is this right? Is this
right,
right? What is there not to understand at this point?"
right.
Because that's why I, you know, because we have Lavrov in the mix always, he never lets the door shut.
Mhm.
That's just that's the way he's built. That's his programming. Okay. But I think you'd have to say, it better be sweet this time because you've left a sour taste in our mouth.
Right. That's right.
I mean, think about it, everybody. Steve Witkoff, probably a brilliant real estate guy for all I know. I mean, apparently he's very rich. Okay. Um, the president of the Russian Federation gave him hours and
Hours
hours
and
and
hours.
hours
Yeah.
of his time.
I
Okay.
mean, I can't even remember how many meetings they had, face-to-face meetings. So it was quite a number of them, and they were lengthy meetings, 4 or 5 hours each time. So you're absolutely right. They gave him a lot of time, and they took it very seriously, and said, "Well, he's obviously here speaking on behalf of the president, so we'll talk to him seriously." So now, I mean, what would be the point? What I mean, you look, oh, another phone conversation with Trump, okay, and what's the point of that if he's going to change his position within 48 hours? He's going to be saying the opposite. That's just a waste of time.
Well, I suppose much will be written eventually, depending on how things work out, I suppose, about the Anchorage meeting. One of the things that crossed my mind, because again, there's a lot of people in our land. It was a waste of time. It was love. No, I don't go that far. But the Russians got to hear what Trump, in his own words, I mean, obviously with AIDS and all that, and Trump was afforded the Russian position,
Right.
unfiltered.
Yep.
And I think for the Russians that was worthwhile, and I still think it was,
Right.
okay.
Right. No,
Um,
that's right. They
but
got that
I have to say, I'm I was never comfortable with the security situation of
with the
Budapest.
meeting in Budapest. Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, there was at least there was always a risk in going to Budapest, but it was a risk that was worth taking because the possible you know repercussions would
Outcome.
be so great. I mean, basically, I mean, hey, they could have brought the war to an end. So it was a risk that was worth taking. I mean, I actually didn't think that anything would happen because it's a serious business. I mean, despite Radek Sikorski issuing these kinds of threats, he's not actually going to do.
Anyway, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, who would have thought that the Israelis would try to kill the Hamas negotiators in Doha? Okay, there are a lot of lunatic. Look, you're right. Given the possible outcome, yeah, I begrudgingly say, yeah, okay, let's give it a shot. But
right.
I would prefer
Yeah, yeah. Um,
elsewhere.
but the thing is that when you look back on this, and I mean, obviously, this is going to be part of the history um, of this war and the possible deals that could have been done. I mean, that
Okay,
was
let's look at them.
do or not take it.
Okay. In December of 2022,
2021, yeah.
excuse me, 2021, the Russians put down on the table.
Yep.
They placed their marker. This is what this is what we want. Of course, it's on the edges. We're negotiating. That's fine. That's what statecraft is all about. Failed. The West failed on that.
Right.
Immediately after the start of the special military operation, it was in Minsk, everyone, the first talks going on. Okay. That didn't go anywhere, but there was some hope. Then it went to Istanbul. It was essentially, at the end of the day, a memorandum of understanding
Right.
for short form. That went nowhere. Okay. Now we speed it up to the present. Trump was given two opportunities,
Yep.
and it was the West that walked away from it.
Right. That's right. And it's very, very interesting because, as we said before, these deals are not
We weren't
particularly
great for Russia.
they're not great for Russia. I think that if the Witkoff, let's say the Witkoff plan, I don't think was particularly good for Russia, but it did show that the Russians are really willing to come to an agreement to bring this to an end, and who's against bringing things to an end. So here's just I mentioned at the beginning that there was this article in the Financial Times, which I think was inspired as a response to Lavrov, And here is the thrust of the story about how terrible and unreasonable the Russians were. So Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Budapest summit axed following Moscow memo. Russian Foreign Ministry's maximalist demands for ending Ukraine war led U.S. to scrap planned meeting. So it's kind of what is this maximalist
Oh,
demand?
I guess the Financial Times are going to tell us. Okay.
The U.S. canceled President Trump's planned Budapest summit with Vladimir Putin after a Russian memo to Washington holding firm to hardline demands on Ukraine was swiftly followed by a tense call between the country's top diplomats, said people familiar with the matter.
Are you familiar with this memo, George?
No, I haven't. This is the first that we've heard about this memo. Um, uh, well, but I think I would think it's like we were speculating that Rubio probably said during this phone call, "Hey, how about a ceasefire?"
Yeah,
Uh,
we've agreed to meet in Budapest. So since we've agreed to meet in Budapest, how about a ceasefire?
how about a ceasefire? Exactly. And Rubio, crafty that he is, he knew the Russians would say no, and then he'll go to Trump, his boss, and say, "Look how unreasonable they're being." You've gone, out of your way to be nice to them, and they won't even give you a ceasefire. And then it says days later, Russia's foreign ministry sent a memo to Washington underlying the same demands to address what Putin calls the root causes of his 3.5 year invasion. Three people familiar with the matter said. There's no real reason. The root causes, that's always been part of what the Russians have said. I mean, they've always said you have to address the root cause. It's another way of saying we want a peace agreement, not a ceasefire.
Well, I understand confidentiality with sources and whatnot, but you know, three people familiar. I mean, three hacks, the Financial Times wants to get ahead of the story by giving an explanation, so that
Right,
to cancel out Lavrov's statement to
right,
the person in Hungary. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this seems to be a machination to me.
right,
Okay.
right. I think so too. These include territorial concessions, a steep reduction of Ukraine's armed forces, and guarantees it will never join NATO. What's unreasonable about that? I don't. I mean, are they demanding, occupation, complete occupation of Ukraine? Territorial concessions, well, that's obvious. Steep reduction of Ukraine's armed forces, well, that's a given. Guarantees it will never join NATO. Well, Trump said but it's out of the question. We can't have Ukraine in NATO. So they say, oh, these are maximalist demands. They're not going to agree to a ceasefire, because we know Macron has already said, he said it
Yeah, but
explicitly. We're going to use the ceasefire in order to beef up Ukraine's armed forces. I mean, he said it. So we're going to use it to station NATO forces in Ukraine. Even they said it. These are
yeah,
security guarantees.
but I mean, these include territorial concessions. Well, can we explore what that actually
Right,
means?
exactly.
Okay, I mean, what does that mean?
Right.
Okay, maybe there's something that can be worked with here. I mean, it just out of hand rejected. A steep reduction. Well, I mean, what does steep mean?
Yes.
I mean, one man's steep is another man's not so steep. Okay,
Right,
I mean, again, when issues of war and peace, thousands of men being killed every single week,
right,
can we explore what steep
right, right,
means?
right. But of course, when they say steep reduction, what the problem isn't even so much Ukraine's armed forces. The problem is Ukraine's armed forces integrated
Into
with the
NATO.
Western forces. So in effect, it's like the Western forces are now stationed in Ukraine, and they think that, oh, well, that's maximalist. Who's being maximalist here? You think it's reasonable? You have NATO forces, de facto getting Ukraine inside this military alliance, a hostile military alliance. Who is being maximalist? That it's NATO that's being maximalist and think, well, we have a right to do this. Russia has no right to object to this. It's being
Yes,
maximalist because
even and guarantees it will never join NATO. Well, that's not the full story here, because if you look back at the Istanbul process, the first right after the start of the SMO, there were security
security
guarantees
guarantees.
in
Yeah.
there, and they were worth exploring. So much so that the Ukrainian side essentially agreed to it. So what is maximalist about
No,
that?
no, no, no,
Because uh, they present it as that NATO is the security guarantee. That's a false assumption.
that's right. Exactly. That's the way they present it. Security guarantee means NATO. Well, that's unacceptable to Russia. So you have to now start thinking in terms of other kinds of security guarantees. And this is the Russians have always said, yeah, Ukraine has a right to security guarantees, but not NATO. Because if it's then it's essentially it becomes a member of NATO. That is unacceptable to Russia.
Just
And
another fine example of the dishonest journalism that the
that's right.
FT just
Yeah,
churns out on a regular basis.
that's right. That's right. And then here, the U.S. then canceled the summit following a call between Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Marco Rubio, after which Rubio told Trump that Moscow was showing no willingness to negotiate, said one of the people familiar with the matter. You see, Rubio, look at what a poisonous, venomous snake. Rubio told Trump Moscow showed no willingness to negotiate.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't see any quotes here, so I think there's a lot of
I said
editorializing.
editorializing, but however, I do find that plausible that Rubio played the crucial
Oh, of
role here.
course. Look, all that time we were in Anchorage, they've gone back on it, Mr. President,
That's right.
blah, blah, blah. Again, uh, I don't even take this stuff at face value. See, look, everyone, George can take a few short paragraphs and we can dissect it
Right.
for an hour.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But exactly right. And then it says Trump was not impressed with their position, said another person familiar with the matter.
Okay, well, what he's not impressed. What does that mean? That
Uh,
means the door closes? Well,
that's right.
this is what negotiation is all about. I'm not impressed, but we're going to have to keep hammering away. It's just the reverse. It means we need to work harder.
That's right. But also, if you think about who went back on his word. I mean, we have, as we said before, we have these whatever the understandings that were reached in Alaska. Trump confirmed that. He said we don't need a ceasefire. We need a lasting peace agreement. That's a key understanding. It's Trump who went back on that after his meeting with Zelensky and went back to the ceasefire position. So then to say, oh, well, the Russians were being maximalist. No, the Russians have been consistent. You've suddenly gone back and being maximalist, insisting on a position that you know the Russians are going to reject. They've already said that a ceasefire in place is not acceptable.
Yeah, and also everyone, don't be fooled by the term ceasefire. Do you think that Ukraine and NATO is going to cease its activities during a so-called ceasefire? Of course it's not, okay?
And
No,
they've said, yeah,
see, this is what Rubio in his orbit, he said, let's just not settle. Let's just not settle.
that's right. That's
Because
right.
if we don't settle, we haven't lost.
That's right. That's right. That's right. But Rubio, I think, is he I think is gone. He's the NATO creature there, and he wants to continue with this. Basically, yeah, continue with this war. Um, so I guess you're right. The Russians, they never close the door. I mean, that's who they are. They always, oh, keep open. But it is hard to see how you get away from this. I mean, that's why it's looked like
Well, George, I
you've
mean,
locked the door.
all the more so the sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, plus I don't know what is going on with these tomahawks. I'm not so particularly worried about that at this point. But I mean, this is, George and I said earlier in this podcast, this is now Trump's war because the Trump administration has included new sanctions
Right.
and it is talking about new weapon system.
Right.
Ergo, it's his war.
Yeah.
And so if Lavrov wants to call Marco Rubio wants to call up Sergei Lavrov and say, Marco, your administration is adding sanctions, okay,
Right.
and you're adding military systems. I mean, I don't know where we need to go from here because
Right.
you are see, talk is talk, but facts on the ground tell us a different thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's right. Um, and I think the Russians would then assess, they would probably um, insist on something harsher the next time around. If they start talking, they're going to insist on more than they were ready to settle for in Alaska. That's the way they are. Particularly as it looks like they're going to be making some breakthroughs quite shortly in Donetsk. They're going to make further demands. They're not going to say, "Oh well, we'll go back to what we were prepared to accept in Anchorage." I mean, you had that opportunity. You know, you spurned that opportunity. So, that's it.
Well,
You could accept something worse later.
it depends on where you get your news from, but the surrounding of up to 10,000 Ukrainian troops, Cauldron is two of them, 5,000 and 5,000. We haven't talked about it before. Just as an aside, George, what did you think of the Russian not appeal, but I mean allowing Western journalists to come in and observe what's going on? How did you take that?
I thought that they were this is Putin doing what he likes to do. He being trying to seem reasonable. And of course, initially I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. What you're not going to get any brownie points for doing this. They're going to
Yeah, because what are they going to report?
report. But on the other hand, I thought, the Russia knew that they were going to say
Yeah,
no.
they offered it and they knew it would be taken
They
out.
say exactly. So they didn't really lose anything because because they knew that it would be rejected, flatly. So I thought it was an odd offer, but I can also see that hey, Russia didn't lose anything by making it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that
yeah,
makes sense. That
yeah,
makes sense to
yeah.
me.
So it's like,
Yeah, but okay, but where do we go from here? And I see nothing other than escalation. And I'm going to say it, George. Everybody was, we were the naysayers. Peter and George, they're pessimists. The glass is always half
right,
full.
right.
you know. And but no, the logic of this, if you, the logic of it is to continue the conflict,
Yep,
okay? And to continue the conflict, you're going to have to escalate.
yes, that's right. That's right. They're gonna have to escalate. Um, but for Trump, that is quite problematic because that's
Well, we're going to do another video shortly after this one
yeah,
on Venezuela. That goes south.
that goes down. His poll numbers are not great. He's doing badly on pretty much on every issue. That's a serious thing because this would have helped boost him.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, I've got a couple of foreign policy successes under my belt. If you don't have that, it adds to the sense that really nothing very much is working for
Well,
Trump.
I mean, the way it should work is that you're above water. Let's put it this way: you're above water in domestic issues. But if you can put that cherry on the top with a foreign policy
Right?
victory,
Yeah.
oh,
The,
yep, yep, okay. But this one it ended up being a crapshoot. I mean, and shame on George and I for spending so many thousands of hours on it. Okay, but no, I agree with you. I mean, this would have been a time it was back in the 1980s and 90s when you'd say when a president is in this situation, he puts on a blue suit and gets on Air Force One. Okay, and Trump is left with the worst of all possible worlds right now.
yeah, no,
And the situation in Gaza is dicey at best.
it's
Dicey
very
at best.
dicey. But you're right because if one even looks at if you could look back in the Reagan era, in 1986 he suffered major losses. He lost control of the Senate, which of course they seized that moment to go after him on Iran-Contra. That was also very damaging for him, but he recovered because of his foreign policy successes. Signing the INF treaty and then having all these summits with with Gorbachev, he leaves the presidency enormously popular, which you would not have believed if you just gone back 2 years to where he was in November 1986. So it always helps, however unpopular, if you've got a couple of foreign policy successes under your belt, you're a statesman. Hey, I brought this war to an end. I inherited it, I brought it
Yeah,
to an
and
end. It would
and
have done him
everybody,
a lot of good.
whatever is going on between Thailand and Cambodia, yeah, Cambodia. I'm sorry, it doesn't have any gravitas.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
it doesn't have an and nobody. What? Huh? Okay. I mean, it doesn't work that nine conflict. Oh, I had on my program a Trump influencer. What a disaster that was. Um, because mentioning all of this, and the other two guests are just like, is this for real? I mean, nobody takes that rhetoric seriously. Okay, because why? Because he campaigned. He campaigned on it.
Yeah.
Okay. He put a marker down
Yeah. 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 He
and
did.
he walked away
He
twice.
walked. That's right. That's right. And it's kind of interesting though that this hasn't really been covered very much in the media. That I mean, I think we're about the only ones who are actually paying any attention to it. These are quite extraordinary disclosures that there was possibility of a deal, then he walked away from that. That's when you
Or let me be more precise. He was led away
led
from it.
away from it. Yeah, yeah. But that's that's going to be a very very serious historical marker against him. That if you do that, there's a possible deal, and then right, it just evaporates in your hands. That's really bad, because the Russians took him seriously. The Russians really believed that he was different. This is very different from the Biden people. They're interested in American national interest. They're interested in a pragmatic relationship with Russia. They took all this seriously.
And George, all the more so. Let's go back to the Minsk process.
Right.
Really crappy deal for the Russians.
Yeah.
Really crappy deal. And the Germans and the French and the collective West walked away from it. And we know that. They admitted it, okay?
Yeah.
So what did they get? They got the special military operation. Then the Istanbul process is torpedoed.
Yeah.
The demands go higher and
Yeah.
higher. George has mentioned it.
That's right.
Okay. Now this let's call it the Budapest process.
Good.
That is been deep sixed.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, as I've said for a long time, Ukraine gets smaller and smaller as a result. You should stop while you're ahead. I mean, Magnificent Millie, we don't really mention him very often because we despise him. But he was right. In the fall of the first year of the war, when essentially in like Kharkov region and elsewhere, the Russians had basically a SWAT unit, okay, not even really military, and they were pushed out. It was quite humiliating for the Russians.
Right.
And he said, "This is your time. This is your time. This is the best deal you're going to get." For such a blathering idiot, he was right on that
He
point.
was right. That's right. That's absolutely right. He said that, and that was, yep, ignored. Yeah, he was a blithering idiot, but he was right on that. But the Trump now escalating. That's really this is really bad news, and it's
And it's a sunk cost fallacy
mm,
because Marco Rubio and those people say no, just we have to go another step, another. There's a wonderful film. I can't remember the name of it, but this whole process with Lyndon Johnson, where he was bullied and badgered and all of that, and then when things were really going bad, he said, we have to go to the peace. He said, no, you've already made that. You've already closed that door. That door is closed. What do you mean? You told me to do this. Okay. Trump is finding himself in a very similar situation. The difference is aren't American troops dying here. Okay.
right. No, that's right. But the thing was with him, with Trump, yes, Americans are not dying, but the war is continuing, and
And he's going to have to underwrite it.
yeah, he's going to have to underwrite it. and is going to have to keep underwriting it. And you know, he keeps wanting to be seen as the peacemaker, and he's anything but a peacemaker. So,
And you know, George, I mean, again, this could have been done and dusted in one form or another by now, okay? At least, you know, the broad outline could be in play in broad daylight. And then he has this caper with Venezuela.
yep,
Oh my, you know, that would have been, you know, Trump knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. He made peace with the Russians. Peace in Ukraine. He knows what he's doing with Venezuela.
yeah, I
No,
think that's
he could have, that could have been his big mo to
right,
push it.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
Now he doesn't even have that.
And I think it's a very good segue to our next podcast to deal with the situation in Venezuela.
You
So
guys, one of the things that, you know, this is a Sunday evening. There are other things we could be doing. But see, this is what George and I like to do. George said, let's think, you know, let's have a thought process here. You know, what are the data points? What are the different trajectories and all that? That's the whole purpose of this. It's very pedagogical. I don't claim to have all the answers or even some of the answers, you know, and this is where we bounce off each other back and forth. And that's how we learn. That's how we think about problems, okay?
right.
And not listen and read, sorry, shit like the Financial Times, okay? Because that is supposed to, you know, that's a brain worm. They
Right.
put worms in your brain,
That's right.
okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Exactly.
All
Exactly.
right, everybody, this is the Goggle with Peter and George. This is Sunday. It's part of our mega wrap, as it always turns out to be. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Oh, is it? Oh, but 10,
10
yeah.
o'clock
The
Eastern time.
clocks change.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
At 10, for you guys, it's 10 o'clock Eastern time. It's going to be a little bit later for me. And that's when we're going to do our live cast. I apologized last week. There was internet problems. It's very rare, but it happens, and it happened in a big way. And I couldn't get into live yard stream, I think it's called. So.
A rumble.
Yeah,
Rumble.
into Rumble Studio,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So it must be a very, very long day because these dogs are sleeping, right?
That's right.
Oh, Buddy's up. Buddy's up.
That's
Okay.
right. And so that's the
That's the pitch for that's the cue for
exactly.
pitching.
Yeah, it's sleeping because it's we've been working all day. You know, been working, slaving over a hot laptop all day, and then, and where's our reward? So they say, well, our reward is long and deep sleep. So they probably need some additional help. So if you have anything lying around, any large bills, any wads of
Logs and
$100 bills,
be a bundler.
exactly, bundles of money that aren't doing anything useful, then boom, straight into that tip jar. That's the message from Buddy. It's the same message. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can work on the technology, and above all, we'll get Buddy, off these dreams of wads and wads of $100 bills. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.